This week, John Strand and I interview Michael Gordover, Senior Solutions Architect at ObserveIT, to talk about the perception in the market of DLP and other better solutions for insider threats. In the enterprise news, Mimecast is offering some free training as part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I don't know why I put this in there, but I did. Microsoft is killing off the old Skype client. Logarithm gets a patent, which is awesome. Tufin launches a first-of-its-kind program for MSSPs, and three reasons why the BlackBerry stock is potentially about to soar. Remember those guys? Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then Gravwell is the solution for you. Gravwell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. Gravwell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. Improve the efficiency and effectiveness of your security operations with DF Labs security orchestration, automation, and response technology. Automate threat containment, orchestrate incident response, and measure operational performance with DF Labs IncMan SOAR platform. Leverage your current security resources to minimize incident resolution time, maximize analyst efficiency, increase the number of incidents handled, and reduce overall risk. IncMan SOAR acts as a force multiplier, enabling your security team to do more with less. Streamline the full incident response lifecycle automation process today. Keep your cybersecurity incidents under control with DF Labs. Visit dflabs.com/securityweekly and request to see IncMan SOAR live in action. Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to Logarithm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With next-gen SIM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, Logarithm provides security made smarter. Stop attackers from domain credential theft and lateral movement with a 99% success rate by using artificial intelligence to control the attacker's perception of the environment. Javelin Networks is the world's first endpoint intrusion containment platform to protect domain networks. Javelin detects targeted attacks and breaches by obfuscating Active Directory, domain controllers, domain identities, domain credentials, and all domain resources. It only takes one compromised machine to jeopardize the entire organization. Don't be a victim. Visit javelin-networks.com and request a demo of AD Protect today. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer's sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Welcome to episode 109 of Enterprise Security Weekly for October 3rd, 2018. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian, joined by Mr. John Strand. Welcome, John.
I like the Halloween theme. So you got the mask, you got the hand.
That's right.
I'm hanging out in my basement, and if I kill this light, we found out I just look super evil.
It's awesome. I got fake weapons and stuff. It's pretty.
Dude, that fake.
Fake. I am known to put on a Jason mask and walk around my yard with a real machete just to freak my neighbors out.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. You're a good neighbor.
Hi. Oh, I just scrolled right past the announcements. We do have an announcement for Domain Tools, actually. It's a really cool webinar on JavaScript, which is in the news, of course, lately. You know, we had the Newegg breach, British Airways, and others that are all, you know, JavaScript related. And so Keith Hoodlet, myself, and representatives from Domain Tools, I don't remember his name, and Tariq, I believe, is coming on the show. on the webcast. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry about that. But they'll be talking about how to de-obfuscate JavaScript, identify it, and pivot from that analysis into other areas in your organization to trace back compromises and cut them off at the source. So it's going to be awesome. That was a pun, by the way. Cut them off at the source. Get it?
I like that. That was good. Nice pun. Well played, sir.
I like that. It's punny. All righty. Our interview for today, Michael Gordover from ObserveIT. Michael's a pre-sales engineer and solutions architect. He's been at ObserveIT Consulting on the insider threat management for 5 years and has hands-on experience with over 300 deployments. Mike, welcome to the show. Is it Mike or Michael? I'm sorry.
It's Mike.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes. It's nice to have you here. I wanted to kind of set the stage and talk about, I've seen announcements from really large companies. We don't have to say who they are. Big players in security that are messaging on DLP and making announcements on data loss prevention products. And I think that certainly I have received a lot of feedback and based my own beliefs on the perception that DLP has in the market for those working in enterprises. Mike, in your assessment, and you're out there working with clients, right? Many of them, have their perception of DLP and are likely moving to your solution. What is the current perception of DLP in the market today?
Sure, great question. So, for us, and in general, taking into consideration the market, historically, data loss prevention platforms, they were implemented primarily as an IT initiative rather than a broader business-oriented information risk. So it was primarily used as a tool to avoid data being deleted erroneously. In some cases, it was looking to identify data that's existing in the environment. But because it was primarily an IT operations tool set, DLP projects were kind of doomed to obscurity as an annoying or toothless technical control rather than as a component in a powerful information risk treatment process. Basically, you have organizations who implement the DLP because they want to assess the type of data that they have. They want to identify areas where that data might be leaking or whether it might be truly lost, but they didn't very much put it into the fold of a cybersecurity program. And as such, now that cybersecurity is getting a lot more mature in organizations, especially when you consider outside and inside risk, you get into a situation where DLPs are used woefully out of scope for what they were originally brought into. And that's, I think, leading to a lot of the perception that they're not really there to do the job that today's cybersecurity analysts are really looking to achieve.
Well, so it's not like DLP doesn't work.
Completely honest,
go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, and to be completely honest, as somebody that's testing these products, I think you're right. How they originally were put in the marketplace and where people are trying to position them are two completely different things. But they very rarely, if ever, get in the way of like a targeted attacker. That's why we've been asking for like a new approach for DLP that just isn't shoehorning existing solutions and saying, yes, it does security too.
It's the wrong tool for the wrong job or the right job, however you want to phrase it, right?
It really depends, right? A lot of the times when people think DLP, they think of a tool set as opposed to thinking of it as a data governance or a data protection program. If you look at data protection governance mandates that are coming out today from NIST and ISO and other locations, a lot of the times they're asking for questions that a technical capacity like a DLP doesn't really fit, right? They're asking a DLP to tell them if someone is trying to sell information for money, or if someone is looking for ways to bypass it, or if plain text information or image data is appearing in social media chat or email. DLP primarily focuses on specific rigid policies that need constant updates to accommodate all of these changes. And that's why that approach isn't really fitting the existing landscape. And there's a lot of vendors right now who are adapting. They're including different modules to try to get those kind of informations or that kind of information. But at the end of the day, you're getting into situations where you're really asking what users are doing on systems with data as opposed to what that data is doing by itself.
Yeah, I tend to think of the traditional DLP systems as there's a document somewhere in my network. It's got some credit card data in it. If it leaves, the DLP solution is supposed to tell me that, right? I mean, that's basically the foundation.
That's exactly right. To expand on that point a little bit more, right? The way that you know that that file has credit card information, for example, is you first have to discover it. You have to first say, hey, that file exists, and in that file there's a certain piece of data, let's say credit card information. So you're really leveraging a data loss prevention tool to scan that piece of content, find variables in it that match a certain pattern, and if it matches that pattern, to take a response action. A lot of data today, I mean, the entire business process is predicated on exposure. You have to expose that kind of data. So scanning every file, scanning every location where data might be in all the different cloud storage locations, local locations, network locations, you end up in a situation where you have just too much information to deal with, even if you're getting the right incident.
You know, I want to jump to my notes here where I talk about the Amazon report.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll call it Amazon specifically, not to pick on them, but it was a public report that I believe was posted from Forbes that said that there was a insider threat incident that happened. And it's interesting because we talk about data leaving. A lot of their insider threats had nothing to do with data leaving. They reported that the people in exchange for money were deleting negative reviews, restoring banned accounts, and offering access to otherwise confidential information, which tells me it was from the outside coming in. In security, as we talk about insider threat, and to your point, it's more about the user, right?
It definitely is. Data loss is one subset. I would say the largest subset, but is one subset of an insider threat potential risk for an organization. You're dealing with, like you mentioned, either intentional or unintentional behaviors that fall into kind of the gray area, right? You have users who are legitimately given access to applications. They have access, like you mentioned, to review data. They have access to applications. They have access to automation cycles. To identify a user who is using that legitimate access to either be an internal vigilante, which is something that sometimes happens with system architects, or for someone who thinks that they're bettering the business or bettering themselves by performing an action that goes against company policy. That's where you get into a very challenging situation. And how do you detect that technically, right? At a logical layer, we are, after all, performing these actions on the computer. But then what do you do as a response when you find that information?
That makes that exfiltration or even changing and masking of data a lot easier. Are those some of the greatest challenges that you find in your clients today?
Definitely. Some of the largest challenges that we find is, like you mentioned, is a technical indicator, such as plugging a USB drive and walking it out the door. For businesses that are predicated on exposure, you deal with transactions that need to expose data, that need to expose privileges, that need to expose an application. What you get into is a situation where you have a technical indicator and you have to know how to respond to that at a human level, right? For the first time in organizations, insider threat is being considered as part of a business impact analysis, part of a risk assessment. But then you get into the tricky situation where, although you're identifying a technical indicator, and that might not be that hard through a log or through an application, what some of our clients have challenges with is, what do they now do with that information? For example, do they now take that information and perform a review of their most talented software engineer? Do they, for example, fire their highest earner who might have went against company policy? You get into a whole level of procedures and policies that need to be taken into consideration outside of the technical realm. So here at ObserveIT, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, even before you get to that, how do you actually handle, as somebody that's trying to kind of move forward the data loss prevention conversation, how do you even handle the false positives? those LP solutions, how do you actually refine out false positives to get down to a better signal to noise ratio?
So the challenge with DLP primarily is there's a whole swath of information that's missing in terms of technical indicators. So that's one aspect of it. There's areas that aren't taken into consideration, for example, website visitation, login times, anomaly detection. But to answer the specific question around how do you reduce the noise ratio, the false positive ratio, that's a really hard question to answer. You have to take into affect the context of the situation that is being triggered. So it's not enough just to say, hey, 80 gigabytes of data has left my environment, and as part of that data transfer, one particular file has PII into it. You can get that information today. What you have a challenge with is this going to hurt my business or not? Is this someone who's sending this information at the end of a quarter because it's part of a report or it's part of a project, or are they doing this because they are acting on the behest of somebody else, for example? So what you end up in the situation is you have to understand the context, and systems and tools that really know what happened before and after an incident is really what's starting to come into play now. You're starting to see a lot more active monitoring solutions, which are looking at the broader picture of activity. For example, file went out, I need to know what happened before. Person reviewing that alert, that becomes more of a challenge as well.
I've always liked that in the ObserveIT approach, observing the context that situation happened. I think, John, is a great way to help reduce those false positives and really narrow in on what you care about that might be either leaving or being changed in your environment, right? Because it's not, I think when we think about insider threat, with the Amazon article helped me realize is it's not just stuff leaving, right? It's any action that an insider might take that could threaten your business processes, data, whatever.
And it doesn't always have to be a malicious intent action.
Yeah.
Right? Like it could be somebody that's just simply opening up a VNC session back home so they can surf porn. I mean, that's not like they're trying to hack your organization, but it does incorporate a greater risk for your organization just by having them do that.
That's a very, very valid point. You get into situations where really they are a gray area. And what happens is, although, for example, from the ObserveIT approach, we can identify all of those activities that you just mentioned, whether it's surfing the web or moving files and looking at suspicious login times, but it really comes down to what is within the scope of the business. Because you might have a situation where someone opens up a VPN channel to go log in at home and watch porn. But how that affects the business negatively is a question for the business owners to decide. Maybe it's perfectly justifiable, maybe it's okay. Or in other situations, what happens if that VPN connection, instead of leading to porn, leads to a BitTorrent transfer of copyrighted information? And it's coming from an IP address associated with the business. Now that business is potentially liable for copyright infringement. So you get into the situation where, from an insider threat perspective, you really have to define the scope of what you're looking for and adjust the risk just the same way that you would adjust the risk with any part of your business, whether it's dealing with redacting information, whether it's not caring about certain information that you're collecting. So it's as much of a process conversation for a lot of us, for a lot of our clients, as it is a technology conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was going to ask what security professionals need to know to tackle this problem, and it sounds like you hit on something there, that it's technology and processes. And what specifically do you find, Mike, in process-wise that needs to be adjusted most often?
So most often, and this is a bit of a controversial topic, is surveillance and the necessity for it. So, for example, when you looked at DLP 5-10 years ago, there was never, a lot of the times you have HR. So the biggest answers, as companies are moving away from a preventive method to a more surveillance method, the act of monitoring a person and their behaviors or places, you have to really be specifically in tune with what you're deciding to collect and what you don't want to collect. And you have to involve and escalate that process to a legal or an HR entity. If you look at the insider threat market as a whole, a lot of the driving forces in that are public market. It's things like NISPOM controls, NIST, things that come from the federal space, where privacy is usually a second factor to getting the information that's needed. When you bring that down to the private space, when you bring that down to corporate, you run into situations where by increasing surveillance, you're reducing the privacy of an employee. And you need to balance that out in an effective manner, both at a process and a technology level. So you need technology in place that not only can gather data, but can safeguard it as well. And part of that safeguard is safeguarding the identity of the user too.
Well, and also to kind of leverage off that a little bit more, you also desperately need to communicate that to your employees. You mentioned bringing HR in, and one of HR's main goals is being clear what is being monitored in an organization of all their employees.
Exactly right.
Exactly. And I also think why is important too, so that the users understand that it's not to spy on them specifically, right, but to protect the integrity of the business.
That's correct. We all do a level of monitoring at an organization, right? Email gets filtered already, web proxy logs get reviewed, event logs get reviewed. But when you're looking for outside threats, that's more or less acceptable for an organization to say, fine, we're looking for external attackers. The moment you turn that lens inward, you have to make sure that you set up some guidelines. And those guidelines are actually pretty simple as long as an organization can follow them. First of all, you want to make sure that you're monitoring for the right reasons. Accountability, not really productivity, right? The biggest fear for most users is that my productivity, my evaluation as an employee is going to be somehow evaluated and I could potentially get fired for my job performance. It has to be specifically accountability and security that's involved. Especially you email on their machine, tools today don't have that granularity to be able to restrict that.
So when let's say a user's credentials are taken over by like John's pen test team, right? Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that you pick up on some of that, right? Because it may not be the end user physically doing it, but someone else is taking control of their credentials. So I mean, this has some double benefit here, right?
It's true. There's a lot of there's a lot of research being done right now into the benefits of an insider threat solution for potential external threat, right? That's definitely one of them. Compromised credentials are really common. You run into situations where you take over someone's machine using their credentials, and then you're spamming a bunch of machines trying to get access to them, try to look at all the folders that you can get access to. And it's important to identify that. And the way that you do that is you try to identify the patterns of what a normal user would do on their system. You look at what applications they launch, what they do, and you look for, I hate the word deviation because it brings up behavioral analytics, but it really looks at a deviation of the pattern of that credential and how that's utilized. Is it trying to hit more than one system? Is it usually logging in at a particular time and date? You start getting these kind of patterns out. And if you're looking for internal behaviors that match those parameters, you will catch external attempts at compromise as well.
John, more questions along those lines? So Mike, I just had this interesting question as far as deployment goes, because I think a lot of our audience, myself included, right? When we start here talking about some kind of product, we're like, is it a VM I put on my network? Is it an appliance? Is it in the cloud? Is it on the endpoint? Do I need an agent on every system? Just briefly describe that before we move on.
Sure. So from an observer perspective, we're an agent-based solution. The reason why we're in the endpoint space is because that's where the user is. If the user is working on their machine, we want to be there to gather user-relevant events. So from our perspective, we want to take away the hassles that we've seen historically with other endpoint solutions. Performance on the systems, ease of deployment, making sure that the agents can roll out, and most importantly, that they do the job that they're supposed to have. So we have endpoint agents that are cross-platform. Obviously, Windows has the largest market share, but there's Windows, there's Mac support, there's Linux and Unix support. And as of today, traditionally, most clients want to keep our data on-premise. So we have backend servers that that run. It's all software based that could run on virtual or physical hardware within a typical organization's data center. And the agents communicate back there, and it's a pretty simple client-server model. Now, we are enhancing this with a cloud component in the coming years that will do more of the analysis, more of the analytics, and take some of the burden from IT and shift that onto us as data holders. But for now, especially with the sensitivity of the data, a lot of clients keep us on premise.
And you just released a product feature that I thought was interesting, the file activity monitoring. Is this something that you had before and you enhanced, or is this an entirely new feature? And how does it help people solve problems today?
So it's an iterative approach. It was something that it's something that we've been working on for quite some time. We wanted to take a different approach to file monitoring. So going back to the DLP conversation, a couple of years ago, one of the biggest requests for us has been, well, we have a DLP, we can track our data. Can you help us in some way make sense of that? So the file activity monitoring is actually a piece of this software. It's a module that we're investing very heavily in to answer exactly that question, to kind of bridge that gap. Well, what it is, it's a passive filter that looks at file movement on a machine. And when I say passive, it's very important because we want to make sure that as an endpoint agent, we don't impact performance on an end system. And a lot of the times, DLPs that have over-aggressive scanning, that have over-aggressive performance impact, they tend to be ripped out. So we want to alleviate that problem. So by putting us in, we scan every file that comes through and leaves a system. So whether you download something from the web, let's say you take an Amazon bucket and you download something locally, or you upload it somewhere else. We look at how that file is manipulated, the size of that file, if the file gets renamed, for example, if it goes through a steganography tool to try to be obfuscated, and we track that alongside all of the other user actions. So it's a very important component and module for us because data is king in an environment. And we want to be able to support the same use cases that a DLP can support, whether it's USB tracking, cloud storage uploads, any kind of data, any kind of user action that can influence data, we want to make sure that we can track.
And you can also plug into email, correct? Like Exchange backends as well?
And I'll be completely transparent here. At the moment, webmail is fully supported. When it comes to backend Exchange, this is something that's right around the corner for us.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share with our audience today, or John, any final questions?
I'm good. Sure. I'll
Mike?
Go ahead.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say from our side, right, we really do believe in comprehensive visibility being kind of the key word. We find that the Achilles heel with a lot of systems today is rigid policies that don't really take user behavior into account, whether that means that a user gets a job promotion and the system doesn't take that into consideration, or a user moves from one machine to another and it doesn't take that into consideration. So we want to try to reduce uncertainty for an organization, and this uncertainty reduction, it's a point of view that is critical to most security teams. By reducing uncertainty, you get to the answer faster, and we want to do that without, even though it's called insider threat, we want to do that without reducing a user's privacy or sovereignty on their system.
Awesome. And where can people go learn more or request a demo? I don't know that we set up do we have a landing? I think we do have a landing page, right?
There should be one, yeah. But they could go to ObserveIT.com/tryitnow, which leads us to a test drive where, with no impact, users can play around with the console, click on some buttons, and give it a test run. Or we offer 15-day free trials as well.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you, guys.
With that, we'll take a short break and come back. I got you there. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. ObserveIT combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at ObserveIT.com/SecurityWeekly. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. This is the Enterprise Security News for this week. A note on our previous segment, our interview with Mike from ObserveIT. ObserveIT's landing page as where we want you to go. If you like what you heard, you can go to observeit.com/Security Weekly. That's the page you go to. I really like their, I would call it, John and I were talking during the break, it's an insider threat solution. I think it's pretty awesome. We've been working with those folks for a while. They're doing fantastic as a company, too. The latest reports came in, and I put a link in the show notes. So observeit.com/Security Weekly. Alrighty, our first story, John, is from Mimecast. I really think Mimecast's position in the market today is they want to be like that one-stop shopping for all things email security. And through a lot of their strategic acquisitions they've made and the positioning of their products in the market, they can not just detect phishing attempts, but also integrate that training that, like, for example, when a user succumbs to a phishing attack, they go, oh, bad user. Now just go do some training and try and get educated so that doesn't happen again. To get there for October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, they are giving away some of that training for free.
Well, and one, that's just great marketing. But two, actually coupling, kind of email technical security with user awareness is a good play. And I honestly don't know why more people haven't done that before. Like, it just seems like it was a good idea that many organizations should have been doing for a very long time.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of partnerships that formed in this space. Like, one would do the detection, one would do the training. And they'd all partner with each other. Mimecast is growing large enough where they can just acquire some of these companies. You have seen some acquisitions happen in this space as well. I think KnowBe4 picked up a couple of, well, they're more on the training side.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And they're doing great. KnowBe4 is doing great. But I think that with what's going on with Mimecast is there's kind of a mantra in security, not just in security, but in business, is if you have a certain business market vertical that you're working in, and then somebody can actually come in and start working on a part that you don't do, then that allows them to start wiggling in on your business.
Yeah.
So by having that total package, it kind of keeps the competition forced out. That's number one. And number two, it also makes them a great wedge company for breaking in and displacing existing technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. Microsoft's killing off the old Skype client and going to the newer, crappier one. I don't know why I put that in there, but I think Skype is horrible.
Nobody
I think
believes it, I'm sure.
we're really liking Zoom. And that seems to be the consensus on many of our calls that we have with existing clients and potential clients. When we mention Zoom, everyone from training companies to security vendors are all like, yeah, we were on something before and it was pretty horrible compared to what we have for Zoom. So Zoom is really, taking the lion's share of the market in that from virtual Skype. Conferencing and taking it from Skype. If you've ever tried to use Skype for business, well, that pretty much says it all. Right. You can try to use it.
And I'm still a huge fan of GoToMeeting.
Oh, I like GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar is not a bad solution, and we're still using that here. I think we're looking at switching all of our kind of going back to our previous point about Mimecast, right? It'd be nice if we could find one home for everything and deal with one vendor rather than multiple.
Yeah.
So
it'd be so much easier, but we're always looking. So no, I honestly don't think that they're going to kill it completely. Microsoft still was releasing patches whenever Eternal Blue lashed out last year. Microsoft never lets anything die, which is kind of a good thing, but it's also kind of their Achilles heel as well.
Sure. Ziften was in the news as entering the UK and Ireland endpoint protection platforms and partnering with Microsoft's ATP specialist Threatscape. What do you think of Ziften and some of their moves lately, John?
I still, with a lot of these vendors, I haven't seen them in any of our tests. They're a non-entity. That doesn't mean that the product sucks or that it's bad or anything. It's just I haven't seen it, and it's not really been something that we've encountered. But I still come back to, Paul, we've talked about this almost every single show. Why the hell would anybody get in the endpoint security market right now? It's just impossible.
It's a great point. However, and I've been trying to get more information about Ziften. So if you're listening, I just want to know more. That's all I want to do is know more. I mean, sure, we have sponsors on the show, and there might be a fit, but I visited them at Black Hat. I went to the Ziften booth. They have the best socks out of any other vendor. Sorry,
socks are awesome.
Sorry, Trusted Sec and Dave Kennedy. I get more compliments on my Ziften socks than any other socks out there. They're really cool looking. But I spoke with some of their technical folks, and they started describing what they did. Like their agent can collect net flow and tell you about connections and integrating that back. And so, John, back to your point, like why would anyone get into the endpoint space is because you have to have a real big differentiator. And I started to get hints that they had some really cool technology. And again, I just want to learn more. If you're listening and you work for a vendor,
if you're listening and you have their product, let us know.
Sure,
we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Really, so it's not every vendor, but like I have a list of vendors that I think would be a good fit for us to work with. At the very least, I wanted listeners to know about the solutions because I feel like they help people, and I believe that they help people solve problems. And so some of those people on the list are so nice. Like I've been sending out a lot of emails and working with a lot of vendors, and most actually are very nice and very appreciative of it. A lot of them are somewhere in between, and I get it. Like you probably maybe you have no idea what Security Weekly is. Totally fine, I get it. I don't fault you for that. But they work with us, and then there's like the other percentage that either just ignore us or don't even request interest in taking a free briefing. And I'm not reaching out to every single security vendor on the planet, right? We've been doing the show how long? It's episode 109. Yeah. We talk to our listeners at every single conference that we go to and via email and try and learn about what solutions are best and formulate the ones we want to go after. So if you work for a vendor, pretty likely if you're listening to the show and you have a solution that solves people's problems, that we just have the very like low entry barrier to entry is just do a briefing with us and tell us how your product works. That's really all we want to start.
On the other side, if you're somebody that's listening to the show and you're basically like, I have a product that I absolutely love, please shoot us an email.
Yeah, especially when they're like, you guys have never talked about this awesome product that I use every day in my job and it's kicking ass. Yeah, we want to know about that too.
Well, and there's one product. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Varonis. I just had a call with a customer last week.
Varonis?
They do file security.
Yeah, Varonis. Varonis. Yeah, Varonis. Great company. I did a briefing with them actually.
Nothing but amazing things from this one person that was using the product.
Yeah.
They said they turned it on, it integrated, it wasn't hard to work, and they immediately got useful telemetry.
Yep.
So if you have feedback and you have a company that you love, please send it back to us. Now, Paul and I very likely might actually follow up and make sure that you're a real company.
Sure.
And not some fake fronted company that a vendor created. Not that that has ever happened.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying.
We're gonna see. Check. I mean, Domain Tools is a sponsor. We know how old your domain is that you put up there, right? Like,
yeah. We can find that out.
Yeah. We're still practitioners, right? We still do the technical stuff as well, and including analyzing the market. Oh, so I get the V companies confused. So Varonis is that like Varonis, data protection. I did meet with Brian, did a briefing with them at Black Hat, talked about them on the show before. Great company, love what they're doing. Let's see, Venafi. I don't remember what they do, to be quite honest with you. No. They're another V company.
They're another V.
But
I thought we tapped out at Veracode.
No,
I thought with Veracode.
No, but then there's one more. Veridin. Oh well, Versec is.
Yep.
Versec is awesome. We did an interview with them. Love their technology. Veridin. Veridin is the in the attack simulation market with Attack IQ and others.
Don't forget there's Veridesk, which allows for adjustable height.
Oh, yes. That's important. Venafi is machine identity protection. Don't know what that means, but it sounds cool, I think. I don't know. Maybe we should do a briefing with them.
We'll take it. We'll take it. It's all cool.
All right. So what else do we have in the news? Tanium. Speaking of endpoints, I thought it was. I don't know. Tanium took another $200 million in funding at a $6.5 billion valuation. I mean, at what point are they going to tip the and just go public? Would be their likely exit? They're probably at a $6.5 billion. Like, who's going to buy an endpoint? Who's going to buy an endpoint company at a $6.5 billion valuation? Like, really?
Is that a Series Z funding at that point? I don't have the show notes.
I don't know what their series. Yeah, their series is off the charts. And I'm not saying Tanium has bad technology. I'm just analyzing the business aspect of it. Hopefully, if you're a Tanium customer, you're happy. I think they made a big splash a couple of years ago, and haven't heard much about Tanium recently.
Well, they're kind of becoming one of the companies that's ingrained in a large amount of our customers, and most of our customers have good things to say. I mean, if you have a question about your network, that's the product to use. Now, making the leap and actually starting to do what Carbon Black does, that's a little bit more of a trick.
Yep. Logarithm receives a patent for data monitoring. I didn't really read this one. I just kind of an announcement. I just think it's interesting when security vendors get patents, and they're sometimes really interesting to read. Other times they are not very interesting to read.
What's this one?
Really cool. It's patent 10,091,217 to Logarithm, acknowledging it as a creator of data monitoring methods that enable risk-based classification of data, a critical component necessary to enable security operations centers. Pretty cool. Now, you'll also have to, as John and I have experienced as well, right? Not all patents are the same level of defensibility, I would say. Is that an accurate statement?
That's an absolutely accurate statement.
And I think, I always come back to the Tenable patent on the passive vulnerability analysis. And
that's defendable.
The more I talk with people, they're like, no, that one's actually really defendable, which is pretty awesome. Tufin launches a pay-per-use MSSP program. I thought that was interesting.
Seems interesting.
I mean, right in the title, kind of gives you an indication. It's a consumption-based partner model to allow its MSSP network to automate policy changes and provide more cost-effective service to their customers. I think in a policy change environment, like if you're paying per the amount of policy changes that you have to the MSSP, that could be a pretty cool thing.
Well,
the model's certainly different, right?
It is different. You'd have to look at how they actually benefit from that financially.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they figured it out because they've got to be smart people, and maybe a new billing approach in the way that we're approaching things right now is desperately needed in the MSSP space. Something needs to change. There's no question there.
Now, this next one's interesting. Have you heard of Morphosec before?
No, I have not.
I've heard of them. I don't pretend to understand in any detail what they do. They claim to be the leader in moving target defense. I've not heard.
Like bring your own device, or
I don't know. I've not heard of that particular messaging before, which is it's dangerous. I'm not going to say it's bad. I'm going to say it's risky to create your own category or like problem statement like that, because basically they're saying we're moving target defense. Well, what is moving target defense?
Well,
right?
And it's going to be a long time before Gartner ever gets around to creating a magic quadrant for that.
Well, yeah, and Gartner's going to define its own categories, right?
Yeah, and they kind of intentionally move away from people trying to market their own phrases too.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, weird. Morphosec products could be awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. We're just stepping.
I was just going to say, someone's going to put a GIF loop of me saying, I agree with Gartner. But Gartner doing that is something I would agree with. Moving away from something that's already been defined by a vendor is just a bad... You step away from the vendor terms.
Yeah, I mean, we've done segments on category creation before. Play Bigger is the book you should read about category creation, and does obviously the best job of defining how you define your category, essentially with great examples. So again, Morphosec could have a great product. Likely they got something because their endpoint threat prevention platform is now being integrated with RSA Net Witness. So, I mean, anytime you see big partnerships like that, they do something.
It's
they do
easy
something
for
good.
A vendor to say, "Hey, We now integrate, which means that they throw syslog.
True.
I know we joke about that all the time, but that seems to be by and large what they do.
All integrations are not created equal, is what I learned very early on when I started getting heavily into vendors, right?
Well, and I'm also guilty of that too, Paul. Like when we're on sales calls, people are like, do you have an open API? I'm like, yeah, it's a backend Mongo database that's authenticated, so you can make your own queries. They're like, oh, great, so it has an API. I'm like, well, that's, you know what? Yeah, sure. Just go with it, I guess. Yeah.
I've been seeing BlackBerry more and more.
Dude, they're coming back.
They are. They're trying to come back.
They're coming back.
They are. They actually they were interested in what we do to help them on some marketing thing. I was like, BlackBerry. I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting. So I mean, the fact that like if we
check to see,
when you see,
have to check to see if it's a different company that bought their name.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, anytime you see that outward, outbound public relations reach, it means they're, in this case, could be trying to pivot and reinvent themselves, which then triggers, well, how do we get the word out that we're doing something different? And now seeing this article from investing.com, well, now I'm not sure what those three things are. They want to. So their strategy is to focus on rapidly expanding Internet of Things. They are positioned apparently in the IoT space. So the trend is evident. BlackBerry reported a 32% year-over-year growth in its enterprise channels, which is kind of interesting. I don't know where that revenue is coming from if they're not making phones. They're doing IoT stuff, I guess.
Well, but the thing with BlackBerry that sucks is they should have won in the corporate space. Mm-hmm. They had a huge head start on everybody else. It's just the iPhone was cool. It's just, God damn, we really needed a company like BlackBerry to put in provisioning of enterprise level email on mobile devices. And I think security as a whole hurt because they crashed and burned, and Apple and Android were like, screw that. If BlackBerry burned, then there's no need for that enterprise level integration and security. And it just never came back.
Oh, so in the IoT market, the BlackBerry owns the QNX platform, and they're applying that to autonomous driving technology. QNX is an embedded operating system. And they've embedded it in over 120 million vehicles worldwide. It's pretty cool.
So why do you think that their stock is going to take off? I mean, if they're still doing some things you talked about at the beginning of the show, you think that they're going to take off a little bit more. What have you seen that makes you think that?
That's what the article said. And if they are reporting a 32% year-over-year growth, and they're breaking into using their existing technology to break into new markets such as IoT and automotive, that could be why the market's predicting that their stock's gonna go up. I also think there's some type of security play in there. I haven't been able to uncover exactly what that is. I also just think it's fun to talk about BlackBerry. It gets people's attention because they're like, "What?"
Yesterday about.
They're like, "Did I download the right episode? Is this episode from 10 years ago?"
Yep.
Oh. All right. Well, that was it. One of the stories in there was a duplicate. Again, slow news week. It was slow news week for Hack Naked News too. There will be no Paul Security Weekly this week, as tomorrow most of us head out to DerbyCon.
Woohoo!
Which will be awesome. John, are you speaking?
Did you get a table?
I do. We are selling T-shirts and other things at DerbyCon. We're doing some interviews and briefings at DerbyCon. I'm speaking. John, are you speaking as well?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome. What are you speaking about?
So Hacks for Pancakes, Ed Scotus, and Dave and I are doing a keynote panel discussion on the future of pen testing. So really excited about that. Also, we're staying down at the Galt House. Is that where you're staying? You're staying at the main hotel?
I am one of the few that got a room at the Marriott.
You're so lucky.
I am.
Lucky you.
It was luck.
I like sleeping at night, and when that party gets a rockin', oh my God. So
that could be. I got earplugs.
Good time.
It's fine.
It's gonna be awesome.
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Week.
I'm talking about security and hip hop. It's a sequel.
Your favorite topics.
It's a sequel.
Security, hip hop, and kung fu.
Yeah, it's a sequel to the Kung Fu talk. So set your expectations accordingly, I guess.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching Enterprise Security Weekly. We'll see you next time.